Throughout history and across the world, thousands of people have suffered from nighttime visions in which they are attacked by violent and mysterious entities. Some people have such severe experiences that their lives are left in ruins. There is a nightmare more terrifying than any other. A nightmare that has haunted thousands of people all over the world.
Tonight we're going to talk about the shadow people. I don't even remember now. It was at least a week and a half ago, I had a caller who said, Art, I see shadow people. You know, like I see dead people. I see shadow people. And that began a chain of events that's leading to the show that we're just now going to do. I think we all have experienced this. Well, maybe not all. As you know, I began the program Dreamland years and years and years ago. And I wrote the intro to Dreamland. You remember the intro to Dreamland? You remember things seen in the corner of your eye, peripheral vision? Well, I put that in there because it's one, to me, has always been one of life's great unexplained mysteries. There seem to be things that you will see moving in your peripheral vision every now and then. I mean, it's just like, what the hell was that? It moved. And you look, and there's nothing there. Well, that's why I put that into the intro of Dreamland.
Now, Stephen Hawking doesn't often give interviews, as most of you will know. He has motor neuron disease. It makes speaking very difficult for him. He communicates through a computer voice simulator. But Sarah Montague went to visit him in Cambridge to talk to him, to try to unravel, and indeed to understand, some of his latest ideas.
Characters in science fiction like Doctor Who are always traveling through other dimensions. But it now seems that other dimensions may be science fact rather than science fiction. We now have reason to believe that space-time may have more than the 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time that we experience.
If there are more dimensions, why can't we move in them as we can in the 3 spatial dimensions that we know exist and the 4th dimension of time?
Why don't we see these extra dimensions? Why can't we move in more directions than forwards or backwards, sideways, and up or down? The answer may be that we live in a brain world. Your brain is spelled B-R-A-N-E. It means a membrane or surface in a larger space. Brains are the brainchild of my colleague, Paul Townsend, at Cambridge. The idea is that matter and light would be confined to the brain. Thus we could not travel through or even see the extra dimensions. However, we would feel them because gravity would spread through the extra dimensions from shadow brains that we cannot see. There could be shadow galaxies, shadow stars, and even shadow people who might wonder about the gravity they feel from matter on our brain. To us, such shadow objects would appear to be dark matter, matter that can't be seen, but whose gravity can be felt.
Science, psychology, and religion have all grappled with this phenomenon. Can any explain the mystery of the entity?
I'm George Norrie. Welcome to Coast AM. Brad Steiger, researcher, author. He is our guest on Coast AM. You know, when I used to listen to Art's program, when he would first start talking, Brad, about shadow people, and people would call in and talk about the person with the tall hat and all this, and, I kept saying to myself, what is this? And, also we've got this little blurry thing we see at the corner of our eyes, too, and I want to talk with you about that. But this is a topic that has been kicked around for a very long time. Give me your impressions on what you mean by the term shadow world, because you've done this new work called Shadow World: True Encounters with Beings from the Dark Side.
Yeah, slightly different from what Art and you've been talking about with shadow people. I remember Shadow World came out originally in 2000, and I remember doing a show with Art at that time, and he said, well, you've been working with, studying shadow people longer than anyone else. And I said, well, what you're talking about with shadow people, as you just said, George, that's the things out of the corner of the eye, the shadow. What I'm talking about in Shadow World is something, I'm afraid, a little more sinister.
Yeah.
It's not a ghost book, though I kind of start off with a couple nice ghost stories. And then I get into something that has just been fascinating me and a few researcher friends of mine, colleagues. And that's, we appear to be, maybe it's part of who we are, maybe it's part of the planet, but we're talking about multidimensional entities. We're talking about beings that, well, some people are going to say they're angels because they appear and they do good things.
Right.
And then some people are going to say, no, they're demons. They appear and they do bad things. This was in an old book that came out in London, and he's describing these creatures, these entities, these beings. Thurston Hopkins was his name, and he said, and let me read that, please. They are creatures who have strayed from some unknown region of haunted woods and perilous wilds. They dress like us, pretend they belong to mankind, profess to keep our laws and code of morals, but in their presence, we're always aware that they are phantoms, and that their ideas and action are out of key with the general pitch and tone of normal life.
One woman has been suffering from entity attacks for most of her life. They began when she was just 5 years old.
The first thing I remember as a child at night, I had just gone to bed. My mother just put me to bed, and I could see the lights on in the living room. I had just laid down for bed. I could hear my parents, I could hear the television, and I looked up, and to my right I saw a couple, very shadowy, very dark, in my bedroom. A man and a woman, and they started walking towards me. It was very frightening. I couldn't speak. I wanted to call out to my mother. I couldn't call out to her. I was just terrified. And right about that time, she walked into the room, and it appeared that she walked directly through the two people that were standing to my right. And I began asking her, who are these people in my room? What's going on? She kept telling me that it was just a dream, to go back to bed. And I said I wasn't asleep, it wasn't a dream. I could hear the television on in the other room. And that was the end of that.
But as Jamie got older, the entities that stalked her became more vivid and more violent, making her increasingly terrified to go to bed.
As soon as I become aware that there's someone in the room, I'll go into a paralysis, and I can't move, I can't shout out, I can't, I'm unable to call for help, and I'm unable to stop any kind of attack. Usually it's an attack. You can't move, you can't scream, feels like you've been drugged somehow. The Shadow Man, and this is just a recent label that I've put on this character. The closest I've seen of him is the arm, because it's been around my throat several times. He's very violent. He doesn't use any caution whatsoever. He could care less if my neck is broken. I mean, that's how violent he is. Generally, he's accompanied by a very old woman. She's rather short, draped in many layers of clothing. She looks like a homeless type person. Like all of her belongings are on her. Shawl, jacket, a hat. The old woman will sit on my chest, and she's not extremely heavy, but she's heavy enough that it's very hard to breathe. It's extremely hard to breathe. I can't get my lungs to expand. He'll have me around the base of my neck. She'll come up to the top part, and she's choking me so hard that I think that my voice box is going to collapse. I can't move. He's got my arms down, usually, or just the way she's sitting on me, I can't move, and there's nothing I can do.
What makes these attacks even more frightening is that Jamie is convinced she is awake.
The fear is extremely real. You look around the room, you're looking for any way out. I can see my clock, I can see the curtains, I see everything in the room that tells me that this is real, this is happening to me, this is really happening. And I'm wondering why my husband can't hear them, why he can't hear the struggle, why he can't hear the fight. And beyond that, I'm wondering what's going to happen to me after they kill me, who's next. Your mind and your body thinks you've been through it. But to everyone around you that you associate with, that you work with, your friends, your family, your doctors, they say it was just a dream, just get over it.
For years, Jamie thought she was alone and feared she was mad or delusional. Then she discovered there were others who had suffered remarkably similar experiences. Research for this film produced hundreds of phone calls.
I was sleeping in my bed, and there was a presence in the room.
I was paralyzed in the bed. He seemed like a shadow.
Probably about 6'5", well over 6 foot, very tall.
There was someone sitting on my chest.
Sitting on top of my chest.
The lady was old and haggard. She had straggly grey hair. Kind of an old woman standing in front of me.
And there was an old lady.
This just was not a nightmare. I know that I am awake when this happens.
Can't escape from this entity that has entered your room.
It's a feeling of perhaps the greatest terror that one can imagine.
Art, I know you've received thousands of emails regarding the shadow people, but here's another one. I've seen what I could only describe as black outlines shaped like people at night, almost always in a semi-sleeping state. They've terrified me since I was 10 years old, and I'm 35 now. First time I saw them, I was 10 years of age. There were 4 of them in the room. I panicked, tried to run out of my bedroom, and kept flinging myself against my bedroom door, trying to push it open when it opened to the inside. This happened in the middle of the night, and my poor mother wanted to take me to a therapist when it repeatedly occurred. Once, after rearranging my bedroom furniture, I saw one and got up to run out of the room and ended up in my closet instead. Wrong door. Needless to say, this has been rather disconcerting to my mother, ex-husband, and current husband. Since I was a child of 10, my mother would come into the room because I was screaming in the middle of the night. She said my eyes were open, I appeared awake, but I was incoherent, terrified. First time I read Whitley Strieber's Transformation, I began to wonder if I was perhaps being visited by aliens. So, and it goes on and on. It's a long story. Or, Dear Art, I can't help but write this email to you. The subject has plagued me my entire life, and until I heard your program last week, I had no name for my, in quotes, difficulties. During my childhood, even from birth, my parents and friends noticed that I knew things or saw people that no one else saw. At nighttime, I remember sitting in bed and holding conversations with people inside my bedroom. They'd come to me, and sometimes while sitting on my bed, they'd talk to me. Now, as an adult, I would be skeptical of this story if I didn't actually have proof from my parents who heard the conversations. My mother particularly remembers seeing me sitting straight up in bed talking to someone and listening as a man answered me. These visits came constantly, and of course, there were the positive and friendly visitors and the ones that would cause me to scream and become a horrible insomniac for 6 months at a time. I remember these people so vividly, the good, the bad. I can still see them in front of me. And it goes on and about the encounter and on. And as these go on, 4,500 emails, folks. Here's another one from Susan. It was no surprise when I heard on the Art Bell Show about the shadow people. I haven't seen one face to face, but I've lately been seeing out of the corner of my eye that which quickly disappears and a very definite presence standing behind me, and when I turn around, there's nothing there. I mentioned it to a friend of mine who's from Cuba about Art Bell's program on the shadow people, and before I even had a chance to tell him about the program, he blurted out, "I forgot to tell you, I saw one of them." He then went on to describe how he'd been sitting at the computer practicing sending digital photos to his brother, who's in the same area, Anaheim, when he felt someone in the room with him. He had just sent a photo and turned around to see a being in the shape of a human, although not very tall, covered all in black except for the eyes, which he said were red and round. He said it had what appeared to be 2 arms, 2 legs, and not very tall. When he disappeared, the computer at the simultaneously malfunctioned, he adds. Art, my name is Jonathan. 17 years old, I'm in Sarasota. I prefer not to give my last name. A few years ago, I started seeing shadow people. Didn't know what to make of it at first until they actually began to talk to me. When I told my parents, they sent me to a doctor to see if there was something wrong with me, Art. The doctor found nothing. Since then, the encounters have gotten worse. The beings tell me things I don't understand. Sometimes I can understand a few words and actions. They seem to have human emotion. And from what I've seen, they show anger, sadness, frustration, depression. When I first started seeing them, there was one that stood out from the rest. I notice the others don't talk to him as much, and I have no idea why. Most of them display average human size. Their speed is unreal. I've seen them race across my room so fast that I can't even see them. They don't walk. They glide like birds. They make no sound except voices. Art, I'm not crazy. I can't deal with it anymore. I can't talk to anyone about this without them thinking I'm crazy. Tonight on your show, please bring up the shadow people.
Matt Watkins is a psychology student at the University of the West of England. Like others, he has experienced entity attacks for most of his life.
I can remember seeing this figure in the doorway. I just knew it was female, but I remember she was old, she had a haggard face, and she saw me, she looked me in the eyes, and she ran right up to my face. The way she came up to me, she glided, stopped right in front of my face, and literally 2 inches away from my nose, looked at me in the eyes, and she had what could be described as black eyeliner running down her face. The fear, it can be a tremendous amount of fear. If you can imagine lying in bed, it's dark, and you've got an intruder in the house. More than that, you're paralyzed. Your adrenaline is building up. Your typical human response is to fight or flight. You can't help yourself, you can't defend yourself. And more than that, it's an unusual experience because you're witnessing some kind of hallucination, and for some people, they might think this is some kind of ghost or deity. It's made me question the nature of reality. It's made me look into many different areas. It's made me look into psychiatry, parapsychology, transpersonal psychology, all these different areas. I realized that there could be other explanations for this, and then I started looking into it a bit more.
Matt was terrified by his visions, but he was also intrigued. He decided to make the entity the focus of his degree. Searching through ancient text, he was surprised to find evidence of the entity experience dating back over 2,000 years.
When doomed to death, I will attend you as a nocturnal fury. I will attack your faces, and brooding upon your restless breasts, I will deprive you of repose by terror.
It wasn't just literature. Many artists had also depicted the entity. In the Middle Ages, it was often represented as a horned beast that preyed on sleeping women and was sometimes thought to rape them. Later paintings saw it as a heavy demon-like creature sitting on the chests of its paralyzed victim. Why were there so many depictions of the entity experience, and why were they so similar?
Well, good evening, everybody. Thunder Strikes is my guest. The subject is what we call the shadow people. He actually had to go get permission from the elders before he could talk to us about this, which is pretty interesting. And I guess we've got to understand where we are in prophecy to understand why we're seeing the shadow people now. That's conjecture on my part. I have no idea. We're about to find out. Thunder Strikes is a Twisted Hares elder and a Nagual leader within the Sweet Medicine Sundance path. His diverse background in ceremonial medicine, comparative religions, psychology, ancient mystery school traditions, and the martial arts contributes to his remarkable skill as a contemporary shaman. Descended from the Eastern Cherokee and Irish parents, that means he's Métis, he's half and half. Thunder Strikes was guided from a very young age by his grandmother, Spotted Fawn, a Cherokee medicine woman. His early training motivated him to seek excellence in many arenas. Accomplished in the martial arts, he was inducted into the Martial Arts World Hall of Fame in 1994. Wow. As a teacher, shamanic counselor, and healer, he inspires and enriches the lives of many apprentices and students worldwide. He is author of the book titled Song of the Deer, along with Jan Orsi, one of his apprentices. Here is Thunder Strikes. Thunder Strikes, welcome.
Welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Is it Cherokee prophecy? These periods of time that we're discussing?
It's actually Twisted Hair prophecy.
Twisted Hair prophecy.
See, if you were to take, let's say you were Cheyenne, I was Cherokee, other brothers and sisters were different tribes, and for whatever reason we realized that we had both the religion of our people, the spiritual way of our people, but it just didn't work. It didn't give us enough answers. It didn't give us enough connection to the mysteries and to the things that we wanted to know in the realms of knowledge. So we would go and travel. We'd go travel with different tribes. We'd travel and talk to different people. And in doing so, we began to realize that, look, there was a lot more than one way to skin a cat here. There was a connecting link to the universe here that different people chose to approach in different ways. And so consequently, we would start looking for truth. We'd look for truth that works. And these gentlemen, these women, gradually started to meet each other, and they formed into what was called the Rattlesnake School. And interestingly enough, they say the roots go all the way back to a planet called Osiria Canuia in the Canis Major constellation, and the dog star Sirius was their grandfather's son. And that they came here approximately 172,000 years ago, bringing with them an ark of the crystal skulls. And that's where the sum total of knowledge of the 11 planets with human life in our solar system, or our galaxy, we don't even have the right words for it, our universe. And with them, about 22,000 years ago, Mr. Bell, they wrote a prophecy called the Rainbow Bridge Prophecy. And it speaks of 8 horses in a race, the horse symbolizing the carrying or the transportation of the philosophies and the belief systems and the core beliefs of a people. And that these horses were running, and they're running towards the date at which all the Native American Turtle Island people shut off their calendar, which is 2012.
That's the Mayan. That's the Mayan calendar.
Yes, sir.
End of the Mayan calendar.
Absolutely. And there's a reason why they shut it off on August 17th, 2012.
Why? What is this?
Because they see that we will develop into full human beings, humanity, humans in unity. And we will be teaching one another, sharing with one another, caring with one another, healing one another, loving one another with individual autonomous freedom. But our number one enemy is ignorance, superstition, slavery, dogma, the dark side.
The modern day is what you're talking about. And you say that this quickening, interesting choice of terms, selection of terms, began, did you say 2000?
Actually, 2001.
2001.
It actually started on midnight of 2001. That was the
that sounds just about right, actually. As I look at events that have occurred, it seems just exactly right. That we took a little bit of a quantum leap at that point, and events have been certainly quickening.
And see, I think that from 1980 to 2000, when we were in the awakening, you take this chronic stress fatigue syndrome malady that's going around. That was almost non-existent until approximately 83, 84, somewhere in there, when they first started diagnosing different cases. And that's right in the first 4 years of the awakening. And the awakening was moving over from one cycle, one pattern, one timing of life experience called karma, for lack of a better term. We call it Shilimata, but let's just say karma because that's kind of a universal word, and stepped over into Dharma, or what we call Shilimata. See? And when we did that, the speed of life, the actual circle of life, which is our people say we go around the wheel of life once every, twice every 3 years. Well, in Dharma, we go around that same life experience 13 times every 3 years. And all of a sudden, the speed, the pace, the timing, I mean, there's not a person I talk to that doesn't talk about how it just seems like time is moving so much faster. And that is indeed true. Humans' metabolism is speeding up. And that's why we're seeing more and more and more prevalence of the shadow people.
You mean the faster our metabolism becomes, the faster we're moving in some sort of spiritual sense, the more we're going to see of them? Is that true?
Absolutely. Because in essence, if you take, every time we have a negative thought, every time we have a guilt, blame, shame, fear, anger, resentment, jealousy, envy, greed, possessiveness, insecurity, resentment, we're projecting that energetic out of our luminosity, out of our soul being, our spirit, if you want to call it that, and into the ethers, into the universe.
So then you're basically, I think, saying that our negative emotions are what? Creating the shadow people? Feeding the shadow people?
They're completing the shadow people because they're basically inorganic beings.
They're completing the shadow people.
Yes, they're inorganic
the
beings.
implication of that would be, though, that there's some force that's already in existence that we're completing with these negative emotions, but that there's some form there prior to our, what's the right word, completing its existence.
I would say that what we're doing is we're assembling them into our world of perceptual reality because they exist in a parallel dimension. Within the 7 streams of reality, the 7 streams or 7 dimensions of reality, there are actually 72 parallel dimensions to either side that the Zero Chiefs discovered. And these include your 5th dimension when you're dreaming at night. And every night when you dream, you demonstrate what our people call the Laren, the energy-sensitive perceptions of awareness. You go to heightened awareness instead of normal awareness.
So you may be at your most sensitive when you're asleep,
Absolutely.
most subject to perhaps being able to see these beings.
Correct.
Are they beings, by the way? Is that?
We call them inorganic beings.
Inorganic.
The definition given in 1153 BC by the major Zero Chiefs that really started noticing the phenomenon in the young.
Inorganic
beings, and that they appear because they feed in a vampiristic sense. They feed off of our emotional chaos, our emotional discharge of energy.
So then you will excuse me if I get a little crude for you. I'm not as eloquent as you, but basically, if you were to see a shadow person a little more than in peripheral vision, it would scare the
yes
out of you, right? And
example,
you're suggesting it would feed on that fright.
Yes, it will. And see, if you know anything about animals, and I'm not Dr. Doolittle, but I definitely have learned to communicate with animals over my life because we call the animals sweet medicine. And because they have a natural harmony and a natural balance and alignment, and you don't see a dog going to a psychotherapist to learn why it's not a cat. I mean, a dog's a dog and a cat's a cat. Well, we are animals. We're two-legged animals.
Sure.
But we have the potentiality to actually become a human being. And that's what we're in now. We're trying to learn to become human beings.
Are these inorganic beings sentient? In other words, are they conscious in the
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes?
You got to realize that almost every form of everything inside what we call the sacred laws of creation or the evolutionary laws is that all forms of all things are potentially transformable into all forms of all other things. And energy, once created, cannot be destroyed. It can simply be altered in the essence of its energy expression, its energy form. So these inorganic beings are parallel dimensional beings, is the best way to refer to them, that are pulled into our dimension, especially through the dream time, and engage and interact with us. The reason they occur out of the peripheral of the vision is because we need to pick them up with our other eyes.
I believe that you are saying that we're not really seeing these beings with our eyes. We're not seeing them...
Not with your normal awareness eyes.
Right. That we're seeing them with a lack of a better phrase, a psychic eye, or an eye that is now, because the metabolism is moving faster, is just, it's the mind seeing it. Were the shadow people, Thunder, ever alive? Were they living human beings? That's
not in our world in this third dimension as we know it. They've always been present in our dream time, in fifth dimension. They've always been present in the three parallel dimensions to the right and to the left of our awareness.
You seem to be suggesting that they are vampires. They're
in many ways,
emotional.
I would say they are energy, and we call energy Aurendi, to cover all forms of energy. They are Aurendi vampires.
Oh, so there's nothing particularly positive from our point of view about their presence. Is that right?
I don't like to use positive and negative, but I will use good and evil.
Oh, well, if they're feeding on the negative emotions, whatever negative emotion might be present, that suggests to the average person that if they're seeing them, probably that's not such a good thing, because there must be a lot of negative emotions flying about, right?
That's correct.
East of the Rockies, you're on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hello, George. This is Jerry from Chattanooga.
Hey, Jerry.
Hi. Got a question for you.
Yeah.
My stepdaughter sees, I guess, what you would call shadow people.
Okay.
It's always around me. I never see them, and I was wondering, what exactly is a shadow person?
Well, let's see what she's describing. But what we hear, shadow people are these images of shadows, basically, of people who you see primarily on walls, of course, but some people are beginning to see shadow people not on walls, which is even more eerie, I believe.
Right. Well, that's what's scaring me, because the other night, probably, I'd say 2 weeks ago, my car wouldn't start. It started, I put a new battery in it, and it started. I mean, I have never had any problems out of it. One night, my stepdaughter, and my wife had left, and I was on my way to work. I went out there, and the car's completely dead. Will not turn over. I get a jump, and they're back. They're coming back, and they pull up next to the car that's jumping me, and my stepdaughter gets out, says, "There's somebody standing beside you." And
she's not trying to freak you out, is she?
No.
So she sees this all the time, but always around you.
Yeah, exactly. It's not all the time, he said, It's not all the time.
How old is the stepdaughter?
She's 14 now.
14 years old.
Yeah.
And I mean, whenever she says she sees this thing, is something wrong happening to you?
Well, not always. Like the other night, like I said, the car broke down. Thank you.
You're welcome. Where are you?
I'm at work.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And
what do you do?
I'm assistant manager at a gas station.
Oh, so you're in the window.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. No, that's. I just like to paint a picture of what you're doing. Now I can have this image of you behind the window, on the phone with people trying to pay, and you're not paying any attention to them.
Right. I'm more east of Chattanooga. It's called East Ridge. It's just right outside Chattanooga. But our windows, it's a pretty safe little town. We don't have a window. It's just an open counter.
Now, does she see these shadow people, though, around you at work, at the house?
No, just at the house. And it's only been a couple of times. It's not a constant thing she sees. But the one that really freaked me out was when the car wouldn't start. I've never had a problem with that car.
What year is it?
It's a 91.
Wow, it's 15 years old.
Yeah, I understand that. But it's in very good shape. Okay, so it's just that here's what she said. It was completely black, and it was standing beside me with its hands on its waist. And she described it as a guy. And I was just wondering, is that a shadow person? Or
well, it's a shadow something. Okay. I would like to get a little bit more information to see how often this happens, other than a couple times.
Right. Okay.
I wouldn't worry too much about it yet. Other than I would just be a little more aware of your surroundings.
Okay.
Just play it safe.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being part of the program. Okay. Welcome back to Coast to Coast. Tobias McGriff, founder of the Blue Orb Ghost Tours. He's also the host of Supernatural Science, which can be heard right before our show in Savannah, Georgia on WTKS 1290 AM. He frequently contributes his expertise in the paranormal to Sci-Fi's original series, Haunted Highway. Tobias is a professional member of the Rhine Research Center, has helped to create afterlife research technology with engineers from Georgia Tech and the Atlanta-based MIT grads. He is widely regarded as an expert on supernatural phenomena and the haunted history of the southern part of the United States. Here he is on Coast to Coast, his new work, Savannah Shadows. Tobias, I'm looking forward to this. How are you?
I'm great, George. How are you? I'm looking forward to it as well.
The old hag syndrome. What is your belief about that, Tobias?
I hear the old hag syndrome, and I've read most of what is out there in terms of theories. My own personal belief system is that, unfortunately, old hag syndrome has become lumped in with sleep paralysis. And oftentimes I will have to defend
Which is always that possibility, right?
I'm sorry?
It's always that possibility.
For sure it is. And I would say in a goodly number of cases that is actually the explanation. And that's one of the things that I have to defend, in my position, that I'm not trying to say that sleep paralysis is an attack by a hag. I'm saying that they're two different things. And I think sleep paralysis is a very legitimate medical condition. I've had it happen to me several times in my life. The thing is, though, they share 3 or 4 common symptoms. And so because of that, even some of the free encyclopedia sites have started lumping these two things together. The only problem is these are a lot of times user contributed, and we don't know the credentials of the folks contributing their articles to it. But we see them being lumped in together, simply because they do share 3 or 4 common symptoms. But in the same way that there are many physical illnesses that we go through, stomach disturbances. It could be an ulcer. It could be a cancerous tumor. It could be late night pizza. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do that are going to have 4 or 5 very common symptoms, but they're not the same thing. And so my position is that even though we've dubbed sleep paralysis, aka old hag syndrome, there's a certain point where you have to leave, in my opinion, you have to leave that belief behind, and they are two very distinct things.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this old hag. I was told that if the old hag visits a child, the child generally grows to be sickly. Have you heard that?
I have heard that. I've talked to several people that, through the years who began experiencing hag attacks when they were 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. One woman in particular who was 41 when I spoke with her, she had the appearance of someone of advanced years, older than her years. She was, sickly. And she even made the comment to me. She was one of the few people that, because I talk to folks that have children that are going through this, and, we can't see what's going to happen 10, 20, 30 years from now. But this is a woman who I had the opportunity to speak with who is 35 years into this experience. And she even made the comment that after 35 years of direct assault by this thing, I'm a hag. She said, I'm haggard. I'm worn out, emotionally, spiritually, and physically.
Beaten down.
Because of this thing's, very constant presence in her life. So, yes, I've heard it, and I would go so far as to say I've seen it.
This hag syndrome that people have confused with sleep paralysis. Mm-hmm. Medically, what is sleep paralysis, first of all, Tobias?
Well, first of all, I want to disclaim that, obviously I'm not an expert on sleep studies, but we know, off the cuff that sleep paralysis is typically an indicator that you're not transitioning through the different stages of your sleep effectively. There are some contributing factors. We know that stress can do it, anxiety can do it, apnea has been linked to it. People that sleep on their back tend to have or be more prone to it. And basically, you're waking up. You go through your REM a few times a night. Your REM sleep, the rapid eye movement sleep, and when you do that in that state of relaxation, your muscles, your voluntary muscles, are not needed, and so they become paralyzed. If you should, through anxiety or startled out or whatever may happen, come out during that time period, you will at least temporarily be immobilized. You're paralyzed, and it's a very scary thing. But there is a very common and legitimate medical explanation for what happens in that scenario.
All right, with the old hag syndrome, what is the old hag looking for? What does it want?
The belief system. If you go back as far as at least I can go, or I can find some, more than one reference to it. You go back about 5,000 years to ancient China, right around the time of the Yijing, the ancient Chinese oracle, and you will find them talking about this thing that they refer to as the pinning or the pressing ghost. And what was very unique to me is that this reference was not found on papyrus or a cave wall. It was found etched in bone. So my first thought is, how compelling does something have to be? I mean, we typically look at ancient China as being the originator of a lot of modern thought, things that ancient China had it figured out, 5,000 years ago, things that we're stumbling upon today. And for these folks to be so affected by this, that they found it necessary to etch it in bone for future generations is compelling to me. In Mongolia, we see it about 4,000 years ago, where folks are talking about this thing that they describe as darker than dark, which is to say that in the blackest part of your room or the woods or wherever you may be, you can still see this thing's form traced against the night. And these were descriptions that were given that gave no indicator that it was in a sleep state when they were first viewed, only a description. It was also called the dark presser, which is to say that in essence they were saying that these shadows had come to life. What are they looking for? Common theories amongst people that have written or spoken or experienced it for themselves. I would say as a good bundle, for the sake of an interview, they seem to live off the unhappiness of people. They seem to be psychic entities. They seem to need that energy to stay manifest in this realm. If you travel to a strange land or somewhere else, you would be looking for a food source that is something that you're accustomed to. And for a disembodied psychic entity, you would be looking for a psychic energy. The belief that they come from a place of negativity would indicate that they would be more prone to attack those folks that have a negative space in them, which is why, again, where we tie in sleep paralysis and hag attacks, you will usually find it affecting those that are very depressed, chronically unhappy. Postpartum depression, in my experience, has been a major doorway. Folks that have a heightened sense of psychic awareness, because the popular theory being that, some people may not agree with this stereotype, but you've at least heard it, that women are said to be more psychically in tune than men. But nothing is free, and sometimes the hag is the trade-off. So even though you receive psychic frequency at a greater rate, you also broadcast it. And if your vibe is negative, in hag speak, that's just another way of saying vulnerability. That's why I've noticed that it seems to almost exclusively target women, which is something that historically you won't see written about. That is something that I've put together just based on my own, when I say research, I mean story after story after story. And on the tour, when we go into the classic symptoms of hag phenomenon, it is without doubt the most transferable story that I tell. And I'll say this almost, verbatim every night, that in a crowd of 30, you won't confess it in front of 29 strangers. Usually they'll try to talk to me, maybe next to my car after the tour, but usually it's an email 2 days later, and it's saying, this happened to my college roommate, it happened to my mother, it's happening to me. And they've gone through this for whatever length of time. They've just never known what to call it. And these are people that are familiar with sleep paralysis. These are people that have experienced sleep paralysis, and they know that this is different.
When we are dreaming, a mechanism in the brain paralyzes us to prevent us acting out our dreams. Some people get trapped in a state between wakefulness and dreaming called sleep paralysis. Dr. Al Shane has studied over 9,000 cases and believes that it may have been experienced in mild form by up to 30% of the world's population.
Sleep paralysis, as I view it, is a type of dream, a waking dream, or perhaps more accurately, a waking nightmare. Imagine, if you will, there are two mechanisms deep in the brainstem of the brain. And one of these mechanisms we'll call the wake-up mechanism, and the other one we'll call the dream-on mechanism. And they're linked to one another. In particular, the wake-up mechanism inhibits the dream mechanism. So when this one is turned on, you're awake, alert, conscious of your surroundings, able to respond to your surroundings. Imagine that as your wake-up system turns down, if there's a problem with particular neurotransmitters, it may not be inhibiting the other system. So this one may turn on before this one turns off. So you have two systems on now. So you're awake and you're dreaming.
If sleep paralysis might help us understand why these visions seem so real, can it also help explain the shared scenario experienced in the attacks? Although researchers believe that entity attacks can be rationally accounted for, it's the sufferers that have to deal with the disturbing consequences. Whilst many claim that an entity is threatening and in some cases sexually assaulting them, one man and his family believe that it may actually be possessing him.
I think he's possessed because when he's awake, he's not violent, and he just don't look like himself when he's having a night terror. He don't sound like himself. He has a terrifying holler. His eyes are glazy looking. They just don't look like him.
Cody McKee and Monica Forrest have been together for 7 years and have 2 children. In spite of a violent adolescence, Cody's biggest problem is the mysterious attacks that plague his sleep. Although he appears to be seeing something, he cannot remember any detail of his attacks, unlike his family, who now fear for their lives.
I can't recall none of it. It's like I go to sleep, I wake up, and I don't know what I did, what made me do what I was doing. It's just, I feel like she said, possessed. I feel like something jumped in my body and made me just go crazy.
show you the holes. These are some of the holes he's put in through the sleep terrors. When he put his fist through the fan, he went in through the front and out the back and into that wall.
I've knocked holes through walls. I've stuck my hands in fans. I've knocked holes in the door. I've tore the tip of my toe off.
His foot or his toe or something went through that. I think it was his toe.
The only night that I can say that it really felt to me inside of me like something jumped inside of me and took over my body was the night that I jumped through the window.
This is the window he went out. It's like somebody threw him out the window because he did it from a dead stand. He just went out. And that's all I heard. He hollered and out the window.
Whenever I come to behind her daddy's car, I heard a word, somebody say, "I see you later, Cody." That's the only words that I heard, and I woke up, "See you later, Cody." And I started walking back up to the trailer, and as I got closer to the trailer, I realized that I'd done something, and I got to seeing, you know, I was cut head to toe, had 60 or 70 stitches.
But it is not just Cody who has been hospitalized by these violent attacks.
The night he broke my nose, I thought that he was going toward my child, and that's all I could think of, and so I grabbed him to wake him up. And I believe when he brought his arm back is when he hit me.
I mean, waking up and seeing all the blood and seeing her crying and seeing her nose there was actually a bone stuck out of her nose, you know, where it come through. And knowing that I did that to her it messed me up for a long time, you know.
That night, I decided not to sleep in the same room with him. And I was just locking the door then, and he had another one. He ran and hit the door, and with the door locked, it flew open. So then I decided to start moving stuff in front of the door. He's got it to where it won't lock. If you just close it like that, you can pull it back open. So I have to pick up on it and make sure it's locked. Then I pull this bed like that. Then I pull this up against it like that. That way he can't come in. Yet he hasn't been able to. When he hits the door now, it'll crack like that much. And as far as he can get it. This is ridiculous, having to go to sleep like this. You know, most people just go to bed, and you have to protect yourself when you go to sleep.
Unable to afford medical guidance, Monica and Cody grew fearful that his attacks were being triggered by an external entity. We arranged for Cody to be seen by a sleep clinic to see if they could explain his nocturnal awakenings.
This is the most extreme case of sleepwalking and night terrors that I've seen. These have been reported in others, but this is the first one that we've had here at our center to this magnitude.
While Cody spends a few nights at the sleep lab, doctors will study his brain activity and muscle tone, as well as record him sleeping using infrared cameras and sound monitoring equipment.
If you need anything at all during the night, the intercom will be on all night. Don't hesitate to let us know. Okay?
All right, let's hear him now.
All right, love you.
Love you too.
All right.
Okay? All right. Good night.
During the first night of monitoring, Cody appears to wake up, terrified. The EEG machine shows that he is still in deep sleep and not dreaming. If Cody isn't dreaming, What could be provoking him in such a way? The next morning, Dr. Davila studies the tape.
You had an awakening there out of deep sleep, but your eyeballs were moving, and you looked pretty scared there. Do you remember anything like that?
No, I don't ever remember nothing.
You don't remember being in a nightmare or having a dream or on that particular night? Mm-hmm. And Monica, have you seen him show those eye movements in the past, or has he opened his eyes?
No, I usually don't wake up till he hollers.
Okay.
It looks wicked to see my eyes open like that. I mean, it just don't look like me, really.
His eyes are darting around. It's hard to know whether he's actually seeing anything or not. He doesn't have any recall of opening his eyes. He doesn't have any recall of seeing anything frightening, although he looks frightened. In Cody's case, we cannot find a specific trigger, so he is a mystery in that sense, and we cannot determine what is going on in his mind. But in his case, for some reason, he is fighting to get into wakefulness and alertness, and literally fighting his way into that.
Dr. Davila believes Cody is suffering from an extreme form of sleepwalking that occurs during the deepest stages of his sleep. But what Cody actually sees, or why he is driven to such violence, still remains a mystery. Whatever the medical explanation, Cody is still no nearer to understanding what causes his attacks.
They haven't gave me a reason why I do it. They haven't told me, they don't know why I do it, what causes it. All they know is they can put me on medication and maybe it'll stop it. And, and I hope it does. I hope I can take some medication, go to sleep at night, and rest. And don't have to worry about hurting anybody or hurting myself.
Cody has now been taking the medication for over 3 months. Although his attacks are reduced in number, they still occur and are as unpredictable and violent as ever. For many who suffer from nocturnal assaults, their testimony is evidence of an experience that is still not fully understood.
I've seen lots of different explanations offered as the scientific explanation of this. In general, and in fact all of them that I know of, do not fit the data of the experience well. Now maybe someday people will be able to get to the point where they really do fit well, but I do think that it's not fair to people's experience and people's understanding of this sort of thing to take a loose, sloppy, hypothetical, scientific explanation and figure, well, at least it's scientific, we ought to accept it. No, that's not right. It ought to really account for what needs to be accounted for. None of them do yet. Good luck, everybody. Keep working on it, but let's not claim that it's been done.
In the beginning, 3 were created. Man, made of clay. Angels, made of light. And a third, made of fire.
In Arabic, a genie, also known as a jinn, is a supernatural creature which occupies a parallel world to that of mankind. The Quran mentions that the jinn are made of smokeless flame and that they form communities just like humans. And just like humans, they can be good or evil. Up next, Rosemary Ellen Guiley and Phil Imbrogno as we talk about their upcoming work, The Vengeful Jinn, Unveiling the Hidden Agendas of Genies. They'll be next on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, let's introduce you to a couple guests here first. Rosemary Ellen Guiley, you all know her, leading expert on the paranormal. Rosemary has researched, investigated, and written about the paranormal since 1983. Her extensive field work investigated hauntings, mysteries, sacred places makes her definitely a leading expert in the field. And she continues to research angels, demons, ghosts, spirit communications, magic, and shadow people. She writes a column for TAPS Para Magazine and also is a consulting editor for Fate Magazine. Here's Rosemary Ellen Guiley.
I've been working full-time in the field since 1983, and I cover everything in the field because everything is interrelated. One of my special areas of inquiry is the entity contact experience. And I have found in the course of my research over the years that there are many interconnections between the different kinds of entities that we think we encounter. And in fact, the roads are leading back to one entity in particular, which is my current topic of research, the jinn. Most people in the West have never heard of the jinn. And that's understandable. They really didn't enter our paranormal lexicon, but they are major players in the field of our paranormal experiences and our ET abduction experiences. The jinn originate in Middle Eastern lore. That doesn't make them Middle Eastern any more than all fairies are Celtic. Entities really don't pay any attention to human boundaries of race, culture, ethnicity, political boundaries, and country boundaries. They're everywhere, but nonetheless, the stories of them and their mythologies do concentrate in certain areas. The jinn go back to ancient times in Persia and Babylonia, ancient Arabia. They are a supernatural race, very powerful, who existed on this planet before we did. They preceded humans. They were around when the angels were around. And according to their creation story, the angels were made of pure spiritual light, the jinn of smokeless fire, and then God decided to make human beings out of earth and water. When he did so, according to their Middle Eastern creation story, when God created human beings, he asked the angels to bow down in acknowledgement, and the angels did so because they follow the will of God. The jinn refused, claiming that human beings were inferior to them and they were not about to bow before anything lower than themselves. This made God angry, and he cursed the jinn and cast them out of this world. He then gave them a bit of a reprieve until Judgment Day to make their case against human beings that we are unworthy. So the jinn have until Judgment Day to prove their case, and they are attempting to do so by tormenting us, creating chaos and upset, becoming involved in a lot of our paranormal encounters. And one of the things that they do is shapeshift into a variety of guises to keep us confused about what they are doing. There's a faction of the jinn that has the agenda to reclaim the earth. We find the same agenda in the abducting ETs. I got interested in the jinn in the 1980s when I was researching Solomonic magic, that is, magic attributed to the legendary King Solomon, who now the evidence points to was indeed a historical figure. Solomonic magic is attributed to the legendary King Solomon, the second king of Israel. He was the son of David. He is in the Bible. You won't find any references to the jinn in the Bible, but there is the story of how King Solomon got the throne. When he became king, God asked him what he would like, and instead of asking for power and glory like a lot of rulers might, he asked for wisdom, for discernment. This pleased God, and so God granted him the ability to command the spirits. He did so with the help of a magical ring, and he was given great magical knowledge. Now, one of the things that Solomon wanted to do was build a huge temple in Jerusalem, and this was to house the Ark of the Covenant, a mysterious box from which the voice and presence of God emanated and was guarded by high-level angels called cherubim. This required a lot of labor, and in ancient times, when you needed a lot of labor, you had slaves do it. Well, Solomon did not enslave people. According to the Testament of Solomon, a text outside of the canonical literature, he enslaved the jinn. He used his magical abilities to command the jinn and come and cut marble and construct the temples. The jinn were very resentful of this, and they were enslaved for the remainder of Solomon's life. Well, jinn really disappear from our paranormal knowledge except through the magical traditions, because the wisdom that was attributed to King Solomon became incorporated into magical texts called grimoires, and these are books for conjuring spirits. In the translations into English, These entities are called spirits or angels or demons, rarely jinn, which is what they were originally intended for. Otherwise, the only way we know about the jinn is through fairy tales, the Arabian Nights, the genie in the bottle, and in fact that's where the term genie comes from, jinn, a name which means the hidden ones. And so in these fanciful portrayals of odd-looking entities who float out of lamps and bottles and clouds of smoke and have to grant wishes, we've come to regard them as imaginary entities, kind of silly not to be taken seriously, when in fact the jinn are actually quite powerful entities.
So tarnished it almost looks black. What's the matter? Yeah, you tell him, Attila. Like me, a little late. Well, let's clean it up. Sure must be old if dirt's any sign.
Who are you expecting? Who? I'm the genie in the lamp, that's who. Aladdin, magic, the whole bit.
Genie? Genie?
Yeah.
You don't look like a genie.
Well, what difference does the wardrobe make? The routine's the same. You see, a couple thousand years ago, I used to wear those crazy silk balloon long johns with the wild turban. Yeah, but let me tell you something, Jack.
George?
Jack, George, as long as you're healthy. Today, we dress like the times, except for these velveteen muckalucks.
Muckalucks? Genie. If you are the genie, then I must be the master of the lamp.
Big deal. Master of the lamp. All right, you got yourself a free wish.
There's supposed to be 3 wishes.
Ah, there's the rub. There used to be 3 wishes. But let me tell you something, Jack.
George?
You don't want to change your name, huh? The scene used to include 3 wishes, but the recipients were abusing their privilege, so we had to cut down. So, give it a little thought, give me a call. Or do me a favor, will you? Sleep on it.
Sleep on it?
Yeah. You know the routine. Once you make the wish, that's what you have to live with.
What do people usually wish for?
Oh, let me tell you something, Jack. George. The wildest. Oh, it's enough to make you blush. A fortune they wish for. Money, precious jewels.
That's not so bad.
It's not so bad, huh? You see, you're no different from the rest. All right, you get yourself a lot of riches, a lot of dough. Now you're in trouble with the Internal Revenue. You got a lot of phony charities come bugging you. Long-lost relatives come banging at your door. It's enough to make you flip your gourd.
Not wealth, huh?
Forget the wealth.
Maybe love?
Love? That's what you'd wish for? What are you, some kind of a kook? You call me back from 2,000 years to come and help you and you wish for love? You don't wish for love, Jack. You find it.
But I'm not really sure what it is I want. And if it isn't wealth or love, I don't know.
Well, like I told you, give it a little thought, huh? Ponder. Drop it down a well a couple of times, see if it splashes. But don't go rubbing that lamp every time you get a bug, because that smoke is murder in my sinus. The next time I make the scene, that's it. Like later, George.
They can shapeshift into any form. They live for thousands of years. They have families like we do in a social structure. They're like us in many ways. They're good, they're bad, they're indifferent. They come in different moral stripes. But there is a faction of them that's very resentful that the jinn lost their original homeland to us, and they want it back, and they're trying to take it back through guerrilla paranormal warfare. They do not have forms that enable them to stay very long in this dimension, So their abilities to interact with us and to keep us off balance have certain restrictions. One of the ways that they're seeking to get around this is by interbreeding with us and creating hybrids. The hybrids would have the powers of the jinn and the appearance of humans so that they could pass easily on this world. The jinn have a long tradition of being able to interbreed with humans. As master shapeshifters, they seem to have the ability to take physical form for short periods of time. The stories go back to ancient times of their abilities to be lovers of humans, that they can take the appearance of beautiful men and women and have visitations at night. The visitations that we often ascribe to entities like the incubus and the succubus or to extraterrestrials are also jinn. People feel physical contact. They feel real sexual experiences. We find the same in fairy lore. The incubus and the succubus are terms for demonic entities who have sexual intercourse with human beings. The incubus is a male demon that preys upon women, and the succubus is a female-shaped demon who preys upon men. I think that a lot of these experiences that we have that we attribute to other entities are in fact jinn. The jinn hiding in plain sight behind the disguises of various kinds of entities.
Hello, Rosemary, how are you?
Fine, thanks, George. Very busy this time of year, lots of research.
Absolutely. Let's bring in Phil Imbrogno. Of course, he's been on the program many times before. He's been investigating and researching paranormal phenomenon for more than 30 years. He has been a science educator for years, has authored countless magazine articles on science and the paranormal, has appeared or has done research for a number of major organizations and television presentations on UFOs, astronomy, and the paranormal. He is writing a book with Rosemary Ellen Guiley called The Vengeful Jinn, Unveiling the Hidden Agendas of Genies, which will come out sometime in March, Phil, right?
Yes, George, in March, hopefully.
Well, super. And hello to you, and glad you're joining us as well. This is an interesting topic, Rosemary. How did you two key in on the jinn?
We started having conversations several years ago about our mutual interest in interdimensional entity contact and the areas where people are likely to encounter certain kinds of phenomena, the geographic and geophysical profiles of those. And we discovered we also had mutual interests in the jinn. Mine had started some years ago when I was researching angels and demons for a couple of my encyclopedias. And we found this topic quite fascinating, and both of us felt that the jinn are very much present among us, that they are behind a lot of the paranormal phenomena and interdimensional contact experiences that people have, and a lot of people simply don't know it because they don't know much about the jinn. So that's really what launched all of this.
And Phil, tell us about the jinn, and it's spelled D-J-I-N-N. Go ahead.
Yeah, D-J-I-N-N, and actually we spell it in the United States J-I-N-N, but that would be the exact, with the D, Arabic translation. The jinn are an interdimensional beings that have existed before the human race, and they have interacted with the human race more in the past than they do now. They seem to be very secret. The jinn, the word jinn actually means hidden, and that's a good name for them. But that's what we call them as humans. But what they call themselves as a race, no one really knows. They're called hidden because the Arabic people used to believe that they were invisible and that they could not be seen by humans unless they allowed it. But being invisible now to theoretical physics means that you're not really invisible. You're in another parallel dimension that's very close to ours. And we cannot see them, but them being more dimensional than we are, they're not really physical beings. They seem to have the ability, or at least some of them, to enter our dimension and interact with us and look at us and observe us when we cannot see them.
This Middle Eastern approach to the jinn, though many other societies have this entity how did it really focus around the Middle East, at least to start?
Well, it goes back to, you have to remember that in the Middle East, the people, the Persians, the ancient Persians, they have a really long history. Not only the Persians, people, the Babylonians and so on, they have a very long history of interacting with supernatural beings. And if you look at some of the records, they would say that, well, if it's not angelic in nature, and if it's not human, if it's something in between, they classified it as being a jinn, and that would include all types of entities and fairies and so on, and earth spirits and so on. So the jinn, when you look at the jinn, people will say, well, they try to identify them and put them in one lump sum to identify them easily. But jinn themselves are a very complex society, and each jinn is different, just like human beings. They have different personalities, they have different likes, different dislikes. Some of them even have religions. Some of them are atheists. Some of them are good. Some of them are bad. Some of them could care less about humanity. Some of them can't stand humans. They don't like humans. Some of them even are fascinated with humans. But the Middle East has that history that goes back to record these encounters with these beings at that time. And as a matter of fact, I'm beginning to believe that many of the so-called ancient gods of long ago could have been actually jinn.
Interesting. I remember as a kid seeing the Sinbad movies. My dad used to take me with him all the time, and they used to have genies in those movies that weren't particularly evil, but they were pretty mischievous. I mean, they did all kinds of things to old Sinbad and everybody else. So somebody in Hollywood picked up on the jinn a long time ago.
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's all part and parcel of the whole genie gig.
Phenomenal cosmic powers!
In 2004, I began an intensive research of a phenomenon called shadow people. This is a bedroom invader. They do haunt places, we do find them outdoors, but primarily the shadow person is a negative entity experience. A person wakes up in the middle of the night and sees a horrifying, solid black silhouette of what appears to be a tall man wearing a coat and a hat in the bedroom. Sometimes the hat is missing. They stand at the foot of the bed, by the side of the bed. They look solid because they will block out anything behind them, but they have the ability to dematerialize in an instant. They have no facial features, but yet they penetrate their victims with what appears to be or feels like an intense stare, as though they're delving very deeply into the very brain and soul of the victim. They do not communicate. They radiate hostility and even, according to many accounts, evil. People are terrified of them. Well, I wanted to know more about this experience, and I discovered that it's quite common, and it's documented for centuries, just under other kinds of names. The more I researched shadow people, the more I realized how much this form could be accounted for by jinn. That the jinn in their lore often show as black forms, in animalistic forms, in strange entity forms, and they have the ability to dematerialize instantly. They can be black clouds and vapors and mists that coalesce and disappear according to their will. I also noticed in my research that there was a major link between shadow person experiencers and ET abduction experiencers.
Whoa, what's the matter, boss? What's the matter?
There was something
Come on,
here.
shake it out. Come on.
Bad.
What? That was a nightmare. What are you talking about?
No, Dad.
Huh? That was a nightmare.
They had me, Dad.
Nightmares do that, sometimes. I mean, if it didn't do that, then it wouldn't be a nightmare, you know what I mean? What else?
Those of you into shadow people, the Shadow Hat Man with Heidi Hollis. Heidi Hollis, the founder, director of the UFO and paranormal discussion group UFO2U, that's the letter U.com, since 1998. She's been involved in looking into paranormal phenomena from a very young age, and here she is. You tying shadow people in with aliens?
Yes.
Why are so many people witnessing this phenomenon of shadow people everywhere? Everywhere. I mean, and later on when we open up phone lines, we'll obviously find out. But, I mean, it's everywhere now.
I know. I have an alienadvice.com website where people used to ask me about aliens. Now it seems I just get bombarded with shadow people questions all the time. They're like, oh, go to her. She's the one that would know.
Well, why do you tie shadow people in with the ETs? Why can't the shadow people come from other dimensions or some demonic force, if that's what they happen to be? Why are they tied in with the ETs?
They are actually one and the same when you say demonic force. They are definitely connected. They are not much different. And when you think about it, they come in different forms. I have up on one of my sites. The most common form that I personally saw them as were big, hairy, shadowy spiders. Pretty disgusting. They could take up the whole ceiling to something the size of my hand.
In shadow form, though?
In shadow form, yes. And what would wake me up is they would drop down from the ceiling and shake my bed, and I'd wake up to seeing rows of eyes, It was really disgusting. But, then, of course, there's the shadow cat. They'll take that form on streaks, shadow clouds. And then there is the what I call head and shoulders, where it looks like a head is directly connected to a set of shoulders, very broad, and at times you can see their lovely red glowing eyes.
Some have seen that.
Yes.
And, of course, next half hour we'll get in the Hat Man.
Oh, yeah.
Why do some people, Heidi, see these entities through the corner of their eyes as something swift? Is that just something biological that we all see, or is there something to that?
As I was told, our peripheral vision is more sensitive to differences between light and darkness. So I think that is why we're initially able to catch them from the corner of our vision. But it is quite something else when you turn and it's still there. It's quite disturbing. And the presence of these things. I've many a times, I've had ghost hunting type people tell me, these are the shadows of ghosts, and I'm like, I wish it was that passive. But if you've ever been in the presence of such a thing, they have such an intimidating feel to them that is so outright negative. There's no comparison when it comes to ghosts.
Some people have been scared with these shadow people, but I've never heard a story of someone assaulted or physically hurt by a shadow person. I'm not talking about a ghostly apparition or anything like that, but the pure shadow person, I've never heard of, it attacked me. We always hear, I saw it on the wall, it did this and did that, but I've never heard it attacked. It scared them, but it didn't attack. What about you? Have you heard any attack stories?
Oh gosh, yes. The most common physical contact that these shadow people do to people are jump on their chest and choke them.
That's not the old hag syndrome now? That's something else? Okay.
This is definitely them. I've even had several people tell me how they couldn't see what was choking them, but they had a little light in their room, and they looked at their like little cast shadow on the wall and could see the shadowy mass on top of them choking them.
That's scary.
That's awful.
Heidi Hollis with us tonight as we talk about shadow people and the Hat Man. Now, does the Hat Man differ from general shadow people, Heidi?
Yes, he does. He is not a shadow person at all. I had initially put him up on my website as a shadow person because it was something that my friend, my college roommate, had actually experienced, had seen in her bedroom, and I just assumed, oh gosh, another form they're taking on. So placed the drawing up on my website, only to get an unbelievable amount of email and connection to that drawing. And the pattern that was forming was something that I just, I really did not want to even look at. I didn't even want to know what it was. And also, like, I like named all these different figures, these shadow people, and I just call them the Hat Man shadow. Well, I was way wrong. The letters that came in, the pattern started to form where people were saying, you know, this guy is very solid. He, just to describe what he looks like, he's got like a fedora or like a Zorro type hat, a gaucho type hat, and he wears a three-piece suit. He wears a cape or a long trench coat. Some people have even described seeing a watch with a chain on his hip. Sometimes he has a goatee. Sometimes he's clean-shaven. If they see his eyes, sometimes they glow red. Other times they're solid black. And people would say to me, you know, they'd write and they would say, you know, who is this guy? He's the devil, isn't he? It's like they would answer their own question, and it kept happening over and over again. And I was just like, oh my gosh, the devil is showing up all over the world. You know, this is just great. I'm like, do I dare even, you know, put this out there to let people know? And I was very hesitant. And I think it was the last time I was on your show is when I first mentioned Hat Man, and now people just refer to him as the Hat Man, and it's just amazing to me. I'm getting even more letters about this.
Are you saying that the ETs that are hooked into this shadow, this Hat Man, this Hat Man, not the and shadow people as well, are they all related? All related?
They are related in a sense because of their roles that they're playing. The shadow people are essentially the force behind what's directing the more negative beings to do the abductions, to try to conquer this planet. And this is not the first planet that they've done this to. And in the Bible, it's written of, you know, demonic creatures that could take on any form. I mean, this sounds an awful lot like what these shadow people are able to do. And then to have this Hat Man showing up also in the same area where these shadow people are often being seen, the Grim Reaper-looking creature, same thing. And you gotta, you know, I've had, you know, many people write to me saying, you know, some aliens took me down to a very hot and smelly place, smelled like sulfur, and did experiments on me. You know, is this the place of torture written of in the Bible and hell? You know, it makes you wonder. You know, I mean, you got to make the connection sometime and say, my gosh, you know, is this what was been warned about for all these centuries in the Bible?
Know, if it's happening, it's frightening.
Yes, it is. And it's important to note, though, too, you know, if these things are not actually connected to evil, why on earth do they acknowledge the name Jesus to stay away from them and God? They don't like light. They don't like things that are positive. When people write to me looking for help, I tell them, bless your home. Wear a religious symbol to bed at night, especially a cross. Of course, I'm Christian, so I tell people to keep that positivity in them, keep that light in them, because these creatures will leave. And I've had people say, you know, I said, oh, God, you know, please help me. You know, when these things came to me, but nothing happened, they still got me. And I'm like, you know, there's that movie, Salem's Lot, where the guy holds up a cross to the vampire, and the vampire takes a cross out of his hand and laughs and says, you got to have faith in order for that to work. So,
exactly. Yeah.
You know, that's common sense. You got to have something behind what you're saying.
How disappointing! You think you're able to battle off a vampire and it doesn't work.
Yeah, but
well, what are the possibilities that what people are seeing are still the fallen angels?
I think the possibilities are pretty darn good that these may indeed be the angels written of in the Bible.
In different form, maybe.
Well, what form are we going off from? We're going off from the renditions of artists from way back when, of what angels should look like. How do we know what they
we
look
don't.
like?
We
don't. And just when people think that all is lost, that all this negative stuff is going on, I guess we're going to talk about the next hour. I mean, Jesus has been showing up all over the world as well, and people are having positive encounters with angelic-like beings and stuff too. So it's not just the negativity showing up. I think they're just rearing their ugly heads now because they see their time is short. So I think they're more in a panic to try to get their recruits together. And a lot of people are like, oh, my gosh, are you saying, because I saw the shadow person, people or the Hat Man that I'm associated with evil things. And it's like, they're making an impression upon you, yes, but it's not over to the fat lady things. You know what I'm saying? You've got to put your foot down and no fence sitting. You've got to choose a side. It's not about, oh, my gosh, this thing is scaring me half to death. Yeah, it's scaring you half to death, but once you get past the fear and you stand your ground, they do leave. And if you call on a higher force like God or Jesus, it does work.
Why do some people get visited by these entities and other people do not?
I think sometimes that because there have been people that have been visited by the positive and the negative, and I'm one of them. And I think sometimes there is, like my first book is called The Secret War, that there is a battle over individual souls. I think everyone is special enough to have an inner battle in that sense between the good and the bad. And I think that is what has taken place.